Shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, and we have arrived at the last chapter of the letters for the ages. And of course, we're doing this in the sechut, in the strengthening of my son's faith, all three of them, and for their blessing and for their strengthening in the ways of Torah. As it says, so that you may succeed in your ways and merit the world to come. This is chapter 30. So that you may succeed in your ways and merit the world to come that lies hidden for the righteous. A time for work, a time for respite. Ramban concludes his letter and he reveals the inner workings of a righteous man's mind. What mental attitude should one adopt in order to achieve piety and humility? Writes the Ramban. A person must simply say to himself, I will reserve my enjoyment for the world to come. This world is not conducive to real pleasure. Think about this. It is too fleeting. A life of change, a life of work, Shabbat, a glimpse of the world to come is our true and only true respite. As the Talmud states in Eruvin 22a, today is the time for their commandments and performance. Tomorrow is the time for their payment. Deferred payment is essential mental attitude for the righteous. Instant gratification, they realize, is ultimately empty. The Talmud in Kiddushin 39b teaches that the reward of a commandment is not to be found in this world. The Vilna Gaon comments, for nothing in this world is adequate enough to serve as a fair payment. Rabbi Yitzhak Zev Soloveitchik told the following about Rabbi Aryeh Leib of Metz, the author of the classic work of Sha'agas Aryeh. All through their lives, Rav Aryeh Leib and his pious wife lived in dire poverty. Yes, believe it or not, there are poor Jews. However, at the age of 70, Sha'agas Aryeh assumed the position of Rav in the prosperous and prestigious Kehillah of Metz. Soon after their arrival in Metz, the Rebbitzins hosted a dinner in honor of the community leader. The Kehillah was considerate enough to deliver the food for this event to Rav's home, including were delicacies that the Rebbitzin had never before seen. She was particularly puzzled by a bag of white granular crystal, which she assumed was a special dish. After the meal, the Rebbitzin served the sweet crystals, which people told were called sugar cubes. After enjoying some of the delicacies, the sugar, the Rebbitzin approached the Rav and burst into tears. Woe unto us, she cried. All of our lives we took no pleasure from this world, so we could fully enjoy the world to come. But look, now we have faltered and have tasted of our portion in this world. In the Midrashim, Badmi Rabbah teaches how those who seek gratification in this world are content to live lives of frustration and disappointment. Rabbi Dustai related, I once invited a sumptuous banquet hosted by a prominent and prosperous idol worshiper who demanded that every single person in our city attend the enormous lavish feast which he had prepared in unsurpassed grandeur. The elegant tables were laden with every possible food and delicacy in the world. The host was beaming with pride. He boasted that there was absolutely nothing missing from this banquet table. All of a sudden, something discovered that a certain type of exotic nut was not to be found on the table. In an instant, the host's facial expression was transformed. His features were twisted in contortion of fury and wrath. He ranted and he fumed, and then he grabbed the banquet table and overturned it, smashed everything to pieces. And I asked the man, why was he so angry? He replied, Rabbi, you always taught, and I believe that this world is for us idolaters to enjoy, whereas the world to come is reserved for you Jews. Now I see I cannot enjoy anything in this world, so I became angry. Since the Ramban is instructing his son in this letter on how to achieve peace of mind and tranquility, he found it necessary to emphasize the thought of reward should be reserved in the future, for to expect reward and gratification in this world is sure to lead to frustration. Observance and reward. The Ramban, in his commentary to the Torah in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 4, teaches that the intent of the heart is a prime consideration in the divine reckoning of man's deed. As men, motivation differs, so their rewards differ. Know that man's reward for the observance of the commandment is in accordance with the intent of his heart. He who observes the commandment for the purpose of receiving reward will accordingly be blessed in this world with many years of life, much riches and glory. He who observes commandments for the purpose of being rewarded in heaven will attain his desire as well. His soul will come to rest in the world to come. However, the person who observes with no thought of reward at all, only out of the sense of love of God, however, will attain blessing both in this world and in the world to come, in the coming world. In Chovos HaLevavot, Sha'ar HaBitachon, chapter 4 writes, there are two types of good deeds. Some, like the duties of the heart, are concealed and known only to the Creator. Other good deeds entail the physical actions and are therefore apparent to all. For the fulfillment of good deeds which are visible, the Almighty bestows a reward which is visible in this world, but the fulfillment of good deeds in secret, God reserves them and hides them away in the recompense for the world to come. Heavenly jewels. The Midrash in Shemot Rabbah 52:3 tells us a story of Rabbi Shimon ben Chachlafta, who was so poor that he had once had nothing to eat for Shabbat. He went to a secluded area outside the city, poured out his heart before the Almighty, who answered by presenting the rabbi with a precious jewel. Rabbi Shimon sold the jewel and purchased his Shabbat needs. When the rabbis brought all of this home, his good wife inquired, "Where is this all from?" "From the sustenance provided by God," replied the rabbi. His wife was adamant. "If you don't tell me exactly where is this from, I will not eat it. I will not eat from it." So Rabbi Shimon told her the story of how God answered his prayers with a precious jewel from heaven. The wife stood firm, and "I will not taste a thing all Shabbat until you promise to return the jewel after Shabbat is over." "Why do you insist on this?" asked the puzzled husband. She replied, "Because don't you realize that the gem was removed from the table of delight, which is prepared for you to enjoy it in the hereafter? Do you really want eternal table of reward to be partially empty?" Rabbi Shimon considered these words and went to discuss the matter with his master, Rabbi Yehuda the prince. Rabbi Yehuda comforted his beloved disciple. "Tell your wife that she should not fear. If taking this gem will leave an empty gap in your eternal table, I promise to fulfill in the loss with rewards amassed for me on my table." And so Rabbi Shimon related this to his wife, but she still refused to partake. She's called a stubborn wife, right? She came before Rabbi Yehuda the prince and asked, "Rabbi, how can you propose to transfer reward from one table to another in the hereafter? You know that the world to come, one tzaddik cannot see another tzaddik, for each and every one dwells in a world of bliss entirely of his own." So Rabbi Yehuda relented. Rabbi Shimon returned to the precious gem as not to detract from his eternal reward. The terrestrial cave. Here we conclude. In Sefer HaYoshar, chapter 12, illustrates the incomprehensibility of the world to come to the mortals who dwell on this earth. The world may be likened to a cave buried deep in the ground, cut off from the surface contact. The men who inhabit this subterranean vault know nothing about their walls and dark tunnels. Their concept of reality is based on their restricted environment. Imagine how utterly amazed and overwhelmed these cavemen would be if they emerged from their confinement to behold vast stretches of open land, soaring mountains, and rolling seas, all the countless wonders of nature. How they would have been dazzled by the brilliance of the sun and the stars and the endless heavens. Human confined to this earth are thus like cavemen who have no real concept of reality. It is only when man dies that he emerges from his terrestrial cave and beholds the endless splendor of the real world, the world to come. And finally, in the epilogue, every day you shall read this letter, heaven shall answer your heart's desire. Answered prayer. In this closing remark, the Ramban reveals the formula for effective, meaningful prayer. He states that after one reads his letter, they will answer you according to your heart's desire. This concludes the teaching. Treat God's will as if it were your own will, so that God's will treat your will as it were His will. And this is in Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 4. One who faithfully follows the teachings of the Ramban's letter will inevitably train his heart to desire only that which God desires. And therefore, God will surely treat this person's will as if it was his own will. This is not supernatural. For those who pray properly, it is quite natural. The extraordinary is natural. In Psalms chapter 145, verse 18, we read, "The Lord is close to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him sincerely." The second half of the verse answers the obvious question, which was raised in the first half. How can we claim that God is close to all who call upon him when we see so many prayers go unanswered? And the response or reply is that the psalmist emphasizes that this guarantee of divine closeness is only limited to all of those who call upon him sincerely, with total and unswerving confidence. When a person looks to other forces for salvation, he cannot consider as one who calls sincerely, even though, as a creature of this world, he must turn to doctors, bankers, generals. He must do so with the awareness that they are but God's tool. The ultimate power is God's. This lesson of this letter prepares a person to prepare to pray sincerely, because humility and faith causes him to recognize that everything is in his hand, the hand of God, while man and his machines have no independent sway. The Maharshal states emphatically the Talmudic dictum of Ein Somechin El Hanes. We should not rely on miracles, Hanes, Pesachim 64b. And this applies only if a person fails to pray. When a person prays sincerely, however, it is natural for even the most extraordinary thing to happen. The Ramban himself supports this view in his commentary in Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 10, when he says, where he observes that all the miracles performed by the prophets came as a result of their prayers. By virtue of sincere prayers, Joshua stopped the sun, and Elijah and Elisha resurrected the dead, and thus even the greatest prophets were endowed with the mysterious supernatural powers. Rather, their prophetic spirits brought them closer to God, so that they could pray with great intimacy and trust in the Almighty. Every prayer is answered. Even when a person prays sincerely, there is no assurance that God will give him exactly what he requests. Only the heartfelt prayer is never in vain. When Rav Shneur Kotler, the Rav Yeshiva Bet Midrash Kohova of Lakewood, was suffering from his terminal illness, a group of his students and admirers journeyed to Bnei Brak in Israel to implore the holy Stepeler Gaon to intensify his prayer on his behalf. And they confided to the Stepeler that they were discouraged because their prayers was pouring out of tens of thousands of Jewish hearts, yet the Rosh Yeshiva condition continued to decline. The Stepeler responded, "Do not be dismayed. There is no such thing as a sincere prayer that goes unanswered. Any heartfelt request addressed to God must be answered and cannot be otherwise. If it is not answered today, it will be answered tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it will be answered in a week. If not in a week, in a month. If not answered in a month, it may be answered in a year or in 10 years or in 100 years or more. If your prayers are not answered in your lifetime, they will be answered in the lifetime of your children or for your children's children. We cannot say for sure when the prayer will be answered. We can rest assured only that every prayer will be answered somehow and someday." In the Ramban's merit. Finally, the sincere Ramban assured people reading his letter that their prayers would be answered, and the supplicant should be specifically include in his prayer a plea that his petition be fulfilled in the merit of the Ramban. This is based on the Talmud that says in Bava Metzia 84b, which relates how 60 sailors once came to give Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon a gift of 60 chests of treasures. Rashi explains that while at sea, a huge storm-tossed wave threatened to capsize their ship. The sailors begged God to save them in the merit of the pious Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon. In the Tzaddik's merit, the sea was calmed. Now the sailors came with gifts to show him their appreciation. Similarly, if one asks his prayer to be answered in the merit of the Ramban, he may feel confident that his petition will be fulfilled. The Ramban's legacy. In his ethical will, the Ramban left a rich legacy both to his sons and Nachman and to the generation upon the generation of the Jews who are his disciples and heirs of his mind and spirit. The essence of this message is that the humility and self-control can enable a person to achieve tranquility and peace of mind. One who acquires these godly traits will learn how to speak to God in sincere prayer. And when a godly person speaks sincerely, God himself listens and answers the supplicant. And in so, we pray that my children, Mayor David, Joshua, and David Joseph, would follow the ways of the Ramban and follow his recommendation in the letter of this merit, and also read it. Read it. If not read it, at least watch these videos over and over again, and you may have the sechut. And this does not only apply, obviously, to those who I have dedicated this series to, but all of my children, which not only includes Mayor David, Joshua, and David Joseph, but all of those who are my students, who are my Talmudim, who are now, many of them now rabbis, made rabbis, and many others who are following the ways of Israel, the ways of God. May God bless you and strengthen you in your emunah in Hashem in every which way. Final note. The disciples, just like the sons, have a responsibility towards their parents, towards their, as it were, their tate, their father, physical father, those who basically have taught you the ways of the Lord. You have several obligations, just like a normal physical son has towards their biological son has to their biological father. So do the Talmudim of a rabbi who has been teaching and showing you the ways of the Lord has an incredible obligation of kavod of the rabbi and their leader to be of a blessing to not only to their father, but also to the future descendants and generation in which you will be touching in your work around the world. May God bless all of my children, both those who are my physical children as well as those who are my spiritual children. May God bless you. Shalom.